10. Pass tip, and here come the Panthers with a chance. Frosty's open, and he scores!
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Here are your hosts, Jack Ridenauer and Sean Myers.
We welcome you into another episode of the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast right here on the Westmoreland Sports Network's YouTube channel. I'm Sean Myers, joined by my old pal, Jack Ridenauer. We've got a big show to get to again. Regular season already winding down, so we will have our plays of the week. We will talk about our team of the week, the Southmoreland Scotties boys basketball team, which did something very special this past week. Also a look ahead at the final week of regular season section play. But Jack, our starting five takeaways, our biggest stories from this past week. Let's begin with the big one. Luka Doncic, a Laker. No, I'm joking, of course. That was a big basketball
That's
story,
a very big one, yes.
We'll keep it here in Westmoreland County, and we'll talk about the Norwin girls, because this is a team that we expected at some point to kind of look like the team that they were last year when they won the 6A championship. A slow start by their standards, but it feels like they found a higher level of play. And that was very apparent this past week when they went on the road and upset Upper St. Clair. And really the big key was they were incredibly efficient at the foul line. The Panthers hardly got there at all.
And I think what's so impressive about this win is how they were able to bounce back from the first meeting that they had with Upper St. Clair. I mean, they got dominated by the Panthers in that first meeting, especially at home. That was a game that I was on the call for, and I remember distinctly how Upper St. Clair just from the very beginning owned that game. And give a lot of credit to Norwin. They were able to bounce back. They were able to recover. And this is a team that it seems like they're starting to come into the right form at the perfect time of year. That was a big win for them, especially for the section. Basically, they, at least from my math right now, they control their destiny. If they stay out of the loss column for the rest of the season, they pretty much are in the driving seat for the section title. So a huge win in terms of the section implications, but then also just morale-wise, knowing that you don't get swept by a team, that can hang over your head, especially going into playoffs. Never know if you run into Upper St. Clair in the playoffs as well. And, the last thing you want to do is play a team a third time and know that you had lost to the team twice previously. So huge win for them. Like you mentioned, the free throw line was a huge difference in the game, 21 of 24 for Norwin, and then and limiting turnovers. I think they only had 10 or 11 turnovers for the entire game. So huge, big win for Norwin, and something that, moving forward, they can really build off of moving into the playoffs.
Yeah, it wasn't a great start to the game, but they had a terrific finish to it. And as you mentioned, they redeemed that loss earlier in the season. 56-47, they knock off the Panthers. To your point, Upper St. Clair, a little bit of a skid, at least compared to where they had been. So Norwin is in first place right now. So if they take care of business, and they followed it up with the win against Mount Lebanon as well, which is a pretty good team, they take care of business in this final week, including a showdown against Hempfield area, then they'll be the section champs. And that's very, very significant in terms of seedings. Now, they were almost our team of the week, Jack, but they did drop a non-section game over the weekend against a reigning champion in their own right in South Fayette. The Lions went to Norwin and won 48-36. The bright spot in that game, well, one, Norwin always plays the best of the best in terms of competition. So that is something that's going to benefit them, certainly heading into the playoffs. But also Kendall Berger, a special moment for her. She got to 1,000 points against the Lions. She's had a great career, certainly a great season.
Well-deserved for a player that has worked so hard and someone that has been a regular, really offensively, going back to her sophomore season, and somebody that was part of the team that came so close to a championship, and then part of the team that wins the championship as well, and just the player that you want to have guiding this team at this time of the year. So big congratulations to her, who, again, she has worked so hard for that milestone for sure.
Well, a big congratulations to the Franklin Regional Panthers as well. What a win for their boys team as they won in overtime against Greater Latrobe, a game that I had the luxury of calling because it was awesome. And speaking of awesome, Connor Crossy was awesome, 38 points. This was so significant for Franklin Regional in terms of the playoffs, because keep in mind, this is a change this year. Sections that have 8 or more teams, which is the section that Greater Latrobe and Franklin Regional and Penn Trafford are all in, that is a 8+ section, 8+ team section. That means 5 teams at least get in. So if it's in the old format, Franklin Regional is probably basically eliminated. They have some life because they were tied for fifth. Now they're alone in fifth because of this upset victory. They moved ahead of McKeesport. Man, oh man, Crossy had a game for the ages. Connor Crossy, 38 points, including the winner, with about 3 seconds left in overtime. And it actually came kind of the opposite of what you were expecting. Thought maybe Greater Latrobe would hit a shot at the buzzer to win it. The Wildcats turned it over on a possession where they held the ball for almost a minute and a half, never even got a shot off. And then Crossy behind the defense to throw a head pass by Jonah Johnston. He finished a heave at the buzzer. I don't know if you saw this, Jack. Max Butler almost had the shot of the year, but it just rattled out the iron kind. So a very thrilling win for Franklin Regional and kind of proving that they still have a little bit of that championship recipe from some of the guys like a Crossy who were a part of that great run that they had a year ago.
And like you touched on, a huge for their playoff implications. This is a team that I felt, you go back to maybe early January and you were looking at them and saying it's probably not a playoff team or a team that's going to have a lot of things go right in a short amount of time. And that's what they've had. They've had a ton of things go right in about a 2-week span. And if they can carry this momentum with them, like you said, Sean, a team that has championship pedigree, they were there before. I know that they have a very different team from last year, but they still have that same mentality. They still have that same principle that goes around that program, and it starts with Coach Jesse Reed. I think also in particular and specifically in this game against Latrobe led for basically that whole fourth quarter until the very last few seconds when Connor Crossy tied things up. By the way, 38 points for Connor Crossy. What a game for him. I mean, that is an unbelievable number to get to, especially in high school basketball when you don't have a shot clock. 38 points is an unbelievable mark. And a team that was also playing for, I think, something bigger than themselves, obviously, senior night that night, honoring their teammate Caden Brush, who's been battling leukemia this year. So
they had a really cool moment beforehand. They had a ceremonial tip-off that he was part of.
And I think that obviously adds to everything, right? I mean, that gives you a ton of extra motivation and just an extra gear, if you will, knowing that you're playing for somebody and a teammate especially. So huge win for Franklin Regional. And again, I mean, if they make another big run in the playoffs, we're going to be bookmarking and looking at this game against Greater Latrobe as a game that really flipped their season around.
Yeah, getting to the playoffs, I think, would be a big deal. If they find a way to win a playoff game, I would pretty confidently say Jesse Reed actually has done a better job coaching this year than he did a year ago, because he more or less had to start from scratch, other than really Crossy being the lone exception. And, on the other side of things, Greater Latrobe has now lost 3 of 4, 2 heartbreaking losses this past week. Braden Stone hit one with about the same amount of time left to beat them at the Den. It was like 3 or 4 seconds left when Stone hit the winning layup. And then, of course, the Crossy near buzzer beater. So Greater Latrobe sputtering a little bit. I asked their head coach, Brad Wetzel, are you concerned about your team's mental state? He said, yes, I am. But they still have everything in front of them. They worked so hard to get here. We don't want them to give it away. Now they're really going to be tested. Their will and their mettle will be tested. So we'll see if they come out maybe a little bit better for it. Although at this point, you certainly think it's probably going to negatively affect their postseason seedings, but they've got another week to try to right the ship. Well, a team that has righted the ship recently, the Norwin boys, they got a big win in a rivalry matchup in a much anticipated game against Hempfield. This was the one that was postponed a couple of times. First, because of the investigation into Bill Swan, and then a snow out on a Sunday game. So they finally got to play for the first time against their rival. 61-56 Norwin wins. Really a great second half, because they did not do very much offensively in the first half, but it was a different story in the third quarter. They were able to hang on late, and it was a balanced offensive approach, which is what we've seen a lot from this team.
Yeah, Alex Granian double figures, Chris McKnighton double figures, Mario Sukas as well. So when you get that 3-4 guys in 10 or plus points, it's going to be hard to beat you. And I know that this Norwin team coming into this year with Coach Cam Auld, they wanted to shoot the ball more. They wanted to shoot more threes, wanted to play at a higher, quicker tempo, and they've been doing that all season long. And for Hempfield, you look at it on the other side, and this is another just heartbreaking loss.
You've had a lot of them.
If you go right back to the game before that, Sean, I mean, we saw, with Amani Christian, another heartbreaker, a game where they were leading. They were leading in overtime. I think they were up by 3 or 4 with about
and a chance to make it 4, I think, at the foul line.
I think, and they had about, I think, 90 seconds were remaining in the game. So they have had just one thing after another just pile on them, and it feels like a season that, I hate to say it, but I think Hempfield is just looking forward to end at some point. But bright side for them, they still have some life. That loss obviously doesn't help them, but they still have a little bit of life. They still have something to play for. But for Norwin, what a job they've been able to do, especially towards the end of the season. And again, like you mentioned, with the change in the playoffs for Norwin, this is huge, holding on to that fifth place, and especially for the fact that this was a game, Sean, that was canceled twice. So they finally were able to play it, and Norwin, after that long await, able to take down Hempfield.
Yeah, and we'll get to some of the girls' clinchers momentarily, including Norwin. But that win for the boys all but guarantees them a postseason spot in Class 6A. Well, not Class 6A, but a player who's been filling it up in a big way is Parker Hollick of Ligonier Valley. And I know we haven't really talked about the Rams much either on the boys and girls side this year, Jack, but this is a guy that deserves recognition. He's over 1,000 points. He did so with a big performance against Brownsville, 33 points. And Ligonier Valley's having a pretty nice season. They are the third place team in Class 3A Section 4. The team that won that section already is Southmoreland, who's our team of the week, and then Waynesburg Central. But man, the Rams have impressed under a first-year head coach in Dante Porter. I know he raved about Parker Hollick preseason when I talked to him, and Hollick has certainly lived up to the billing.
And a player that has been doing this, like you said, he's had a lot of hype behind him, but living up to it. And the fact that he was a point away from tying the program record of points scored in a game, scored 43, record was 44.
Was it one of the Marincheks that has that record?
I believe so. I don't quote me on which one, but I believe it was one of the Marincheks. And then
the one that wears goggles.
Good one.
That's a little joke. They both wear goggles.
I know. You're trying to trick me there. Good one. Yeah, that's a good one. But in that same game, also had a record for 11 threes made in that game. So somebody that could score in that capacity and in that volume. Not only at the high school level. Not sure if that he wants to pursue a career in college, but he definitely could. And being able to score at that level, score at that rate, especially in this day and age of basketball, with it being 3-point oriented, that's something that really plays into him. So big congratulations for him, and obviously something that he can continue to build a little momentum off of.
Let's wrap up our starting five takeaways with some qualifiers for the playoffs on the girls' side. We talked about some of the boys' teams previously. The girls' teams right now that are in, and this will probably grow over the next couple of days. In Class 6A, the Norwin Knights are in. We've already talked about them. Franklin Regional, Penn Trafford, Greater Latrobe, all in 5A. Franklin Regional and Penn Trafford are having unbelievable seasons. Those two teams are kind of running away with the section that they're in. They're in two separate sections this year, by the way. But the Panthers have been such a surprise. PT has been perfect. Greater Latrobe has been a solid team as well. And then Burrell and Greensburg Central Catholic. We're going to see the Centurions coming up in a big matchup, Jack. But I don't know that necessarily it's a surprise that Norwin, GCC, Penn Trafford, and maybe even Greater Latrobe are in the playoffs. But the fact that these teams have already clinched, they've all had very impressive seasons, and I think by and large have exceeded expectations.
I think Greater Latrobe could be a team that could present a lot of matchup nightmares for other teams in the playoffs. They give me this feeling of a team that does not go down without a fight. They've got good scoring on the perimeter, especially with Carly Burke. They've got good inside presence. They could make a lot of noise. I don't see why they couldn't make some sort of run, especially if they get a good draw. Franklin Regional is the team that I think stands out amongst the group for me, because I think coming into this year, they had a lot of momentum built off of from last year's strong, somewhat finish towards the end of the season. I know that they missed the playoffs, but still gave themselves a chance. I think even though that they had some pretty high hopes, they've exceeded those expectations. I think the expectations were, again, to be competitive, to fight for a section, not, like you said, Sean, run away with it in this case. And I think that they have done just that. I think that they could make a lot of noise in the playoffs, especially with their length, their size down low. And then Penn Trafford, I think Thursday's game against Indiana is going to be a huge one. If they can complete it, go the distance, if you will, in section, I don't see why they're not the favorites in 5A. So 5A for girls basketball is going to be really exciting this postseason in the Westmoreland County.
Yeah, and that's just overall a loaded field, because we talked about South Fayette knocking off the Norwin Knights. Peters Township has been incredible as well. And congrats to Burrell. They're in an awesome section with the likes of Oakland Catholic and North Catholic. And by the way, Oakland Catholic stunning, to I guess an extent, stunning North Catholic, snapping a long section winning streak. Burrow's the fourth place team, but they're behind three awesome teams. So if they're in another section, maybe they're a first or second place team right now as well. That'll do it for our starting five takeaways. We will quickly transition on the fast break here to our plays of the week. We've got four of them to get to, and we'll begin with the Norwin boys. The Knights scored a crucial victory last Thursday at Hempfield. We talked about that, turning momentum in the third quarter. A steal yielded a fancy layup by Nate Cooch to extend the Knights' advantage, as I captioned the video. Kopis, dish underneath, not a good pass, it's stolen. Good hands by Leonard. Cooch spins and scores. Nate Cooch has given his team a 5-point lead, putting the Spartans in a spin cycle. Good stuff from the Knights, and again, it was awesome to talk to Cam Auld and Alex Rainey afterwards, and Cam is just so energetic guiding this program. He's as excited, if not more, than the guys who are out there making these great plays. We continue plays of the week with Greater Latrobe, and while the Wildcats lost their second heartbreaker in a row against Franklin Regional on Friday, Ian DeSer provided multiple highlight reel plays, including an emphatic finish in the first half, with myself and Greg Bizignani detailing the sequence. A very familiar last name for Panthers fans. He is the younger brother of Cooper. That's a great feed and a slam dunk by DeSer.
Yeah, great feed there.
Jack, he had another play in overtime where I don't know if you can technically call it an alley-oop if you don't dunk it.
Should kick.
Butler down in the paint. They throw an alley-oop, and DeSer climbs the ladder for two. Would you call it an alley-oop if you lay it in?
Depends on how cool the layup is, I guess. I don't know.
It was a really cool layup because DeSer can get up. And so I went back and watched it, and I kind of thought, all right, the dunk maybe was a little bit more emphatic, so we'll go with that one. But the layup off of the pass that was behind the three-point line, I believe, for the finish was incredible. And if they hung on to one to win that game, you're probably looking at that play as the one that ultimately clinched it for the Wildcats. So he is a top-notch athlete. Well, in that same game, we'll go on the Franklin Regional side, and Connor Crossy had a career night for the Panthers. It was so fitting that he provided the winning points in overtime as his layup after a defensive stand gave Franklin Regional the victory against the Wildcats, as called once again by myself and Greg. Wetzel with 10. Pass tipped, and here come the Panthers with a chance. Crossy's open, and he scores! And a timeout before time expired. It is not over.
There was 3 seconds left when the basket was made. I looked up, it was 3.3. But I don't know if they called the timeout right away, but they...
Just a unbelievable night for Connor Crossy. He already had a career-high 34 points earlier this season, 38 to top that, including 4 points in overtime, the two most important right there to win the game. And we wrap up plays of the week with the Seton Hill University women, and the Griffins gals got back to their winning ways this past week, including a blowout against Slippery Rock on Saturday. It was a beautiful passing play that led to a Shea Bailey three-pointer, and then she added a layup just seconds after, courtesy of a steal, with Dan Flickinger and Roger Down providing the commentary.
On the outlet, hustling up the floor is Helene Cowan. Shea Bailey still looking for her first points of the game. Bailey goes back out to Helene. Dumps it underneath the Kalich, back out to Bailey, the three, count it! Right on cue, Shea Bailey on the score sheet. Still, Helene Cowan to Bailey. 5 points in a row. She must have heard me.
I would think so.
Now here's the best part, Jack. We were showing some versatility on Saturday, okay? Flick was theoretically doing play-by-play. He's normally the producer now. I, who normally does play-by-play, was the cameraman for this game. But at one point, Flick had to troubleshoot something else. So color commentator Roger Downs, for almost an entire quarter, became the play-by-play man. So everyone was showing, I'm sure everyone does not care about this, but we're kind of going behind the scenes here with this. Unfortunately, the play was when Dan was still play-by-play guy. It would have been awesome if Roger got on there for a play of the week calling the action. But nonetheless, good stuff from Seton Hill women's basketball. We'd expect nothing less with the season they've had. We now move on to our team of the week, the Southmoreland boys. And Jack, what a season and what a past week for the Scotties. They won a big one in overtime against Waynesburg Central to clinch their first section title since 1992. What were you doing in 1992?
I wasn't around. I was maybe a thought, but I was not. I didn't exist, Sean. I was a figment of everybody's imagination.
Well, the Scotties, for the first time since before Jack was brought into this world, section champs, 8-0 in Class 3A Section 4. They dropped down from 4A to 3A. We figured they would have a better season, but I think they have exceeded expectations. 15-4 overall, and Frank Muccino's squad has been uber impressive.
I think what's been so impressive is the fact that, and I remember mentioning this to you earlier in the season, they came out to a really hot start this year. And last year, they did the same thing. If I'm not mistaken, they came out to a 10-0 start a season ago, and they sputtered towards the end of the season. I mean, completely fell apart. And I remember saying earlier this year, they start hot. Do they finish? Can they finish the job? Can they finish it out? Right now, they've been able to do it. I mean, I think that's been so impressive, is that they've been able to keep this strong play going throughout the whole year. Had a pretty, I would say, outlier loss to a Ringgold team that has really struggled this year recently. That a little bit of an outlier. But again, I think this team with the play behind Noah Fellenser, he's such a prolific scorer. I know that he's actually been, regarded as one of the more quiet, lethal scorers in the county, and he has shown it. I mean, he's 23 points away from 1,000 as just a junior. And I think what's been so impressive about him, he's been able to kind of sit behind Ty Keffer from last year, who's now playing at Pitt Greensburg, who graduated scoring 1,500 points. That's a lot of points to have to replace. And so for Fellenser, he's kind of been able to sit back and be that secondary option. And since Keffer graduated, it's now Fellenser's turn, and he's been able to step into the role nicely. So for Southmoreland, great season. Love to see them do it here in the playoffs as well, and excited to see how far they can make this run.
They have one senior on their roster. Now, he's a good one, and Elliot Primus, a terrific football player. He actually reminds me, build-wise, and, his dual sport athleticism, a lot of the aforementioned Ty Keffer. But, one senior on the roster, you probably didn't expect that this team would be as good as they have been. Fellenser's been a big part. Brady Sherbondi as well. A familiar last name with Brock Pritz, a freshman who has become a big contributor. The win against Waynesburg Central was awesome, especially because they got off to kind of a miserable start, but found a way to come back and knock off the Raiders in overtime, with Fellenser scoring 28. They also won against a pretty good Ligonier Valley team in Parker Hollick that we just talked about. Blew out Charleroi as well. So they've got, a little bit of a rivalry matchup upcoming on Tuesday at Mount Pleasant. You would expect that they would take care of business there, and then Brownsville at home in their section finale. I don't know what the committee is going to do when they look at Southmoreland, if they're going to think that they truly are one of the best teams in Class 3A. But either way, it's already been a season that all these players and coaches will remember for a long time.
And you said it, with one senior, right? The fact that, no matter how the season ends for them, I think they know coming into next year, they could be a favorite in 3A. I don't see why they wouldn't be. The fact that they reload with this many players, and they've got a lot of juniors that are getting a lot of time. So they're going to turn into seniors. And when you turn all of those players into, extremely experienced basketball players, I think the sky's the limit for Southmoreland. So this is an exciting team. And I think that if they could keep this rolling into the playoffs, they're going to make a lot of noise in the postseason.
Congrats to the Scotties. Some of the other guys that we didn't get a chance to mention, Stanley Chapman, Ty Hollick as well. Just a really good team there with one star player and a coach who knows a thing or two about winning championships, because he was a part of a pretty successful Bell Vernon area football program as an assistant coach as well. Well, lastly, we will look ahead. And again, it is the last week of section play upcoming. So we've got some big matchups. We will have many of them here on our airwaves on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Make sure you check out our website to see all the live broadcasts. We'll start on the boys' side. Tuesday, Jack, the big one. It is part 2, Jeanette at GCC. The first one went in favor of the Centurions at Jeanette. So the Jayhawks looking for a little bit of revenge. If GCC wins, they will be the section champions outright. Upper St. Clair at Hempfield, Penn Trafford at Gateway, Plum at Kiski area, Borough at Valley, Bell Vernon at Greensburg Salem, Southmoreland at Mount Pleasant that we just mentioned, and Waynesburg Central at Ligonier Valley. Friday, this one likely to determine a section title. We will have it. Kiski area at Penn Hills, Elizabeth Forward at Derry area as well on our airwaves on Friday, Hempfield at Norwin, Clairton at Jeanette, Greensburg Central Catholic at Springdale. On the girls' side, Shady Side Academy on the road against Greensburg Central Catholic on Monday. We will have that broadcast. The Bulldogs really dominated the first meeting, won lopsided in surprising fashion. Greater Latrobe at Greensburg Salem, Borough at Valley, and Bell Vernon at Mount Pleasant. Tuesday, Norwin at Cannon McMillan and Penn Trafford at Kiski area. Thursday, Hempfield at Norwin. We will have coverage of that on WSN. We will also have Indiana area at Penn Trafford to see if the Warriors can stay perfect. Oakland Catholic at Borough, Southmoreland at Bell Vernon, GCC at Deer Lakes, and Greater Latrobe at Blackhawk. Friday, Franklin Regional at Shaler. That is a big one. That might determine section supremacy or at least a share of it as well. And then Penn Trafford's biggest test will not be a section game. It will be non-section at Upper St. Clair on Friday. That I would certainly think might be the biggest hurdle for PT to finish the regular season undefeated. College action Wednesday, Seton Hill at Cal U, the women's men's doubleheader. And then Saturday, Washington and Jefferson at St. Vincent College for a women's men's doubleheader as well. Jack, what jumps out to you?
Southmoreland Mount Pleasant boys, can the team of the week keep it going? But then round two, like you said, Jeanette, GCC. I mean, what more is there to be said, Sean? It's just the way you want to end the season too. Final week of section and these two clashing. And then, like you said, with Penn Trafford, I mean, they've got some big challenges ahead of them. A couple huge tests, especially against Upper St. Clair. But then you've got Hempfield and Norwin for both boys and girls. And for the second time in about a week for boys. I think that's going to be interesting. How can those two teams, especially for Norwin, add on the win? How can Hempfield make some quick adjustments? A lot of exciting games ahead of us this week in Westmoreland County.
And by the way, for the PT girls, I think most people are thinking, okay, Peters Township, South Fayette, those are the two favorites in 5A. If the Warriors win out, including winning at Upper St. Clair, how do you not give them a top 2 seed?
Absolutely.
I mean, they would certainly earn it at that point. As good as those other teams are, Peters already has 2 losses. South Fayette has 1 setback. But man, oh man, to win at Upper St. Clair, to play up in classification after you potentially knock off Indiana area to finish perfect in the section, that would be a statement week for the Penn Trafford girls, certainly. That's going to do it for this edition. Of course, you want to check out our website all week long. Check out our social media as well. We've got the Westmoreland Alum Q&A. We've got our Westmoreland County Notebook, Recruiting Thursday. All of the games, of course, that we have both live and archived. We often have recaps of several of the games on the boys and girls side each night as well. That'll do it for this edition. We'll catch you again next week right here on our YouTube channel. But for my colleague Jack Ridenhour, Sean Meyer signing off. This has been the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network.
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network.